It started quietly, almost too quietly to notice. A white van with no markings began appearing in the condo parking lot. At first, I thought it belonged to a contractor working on one of the units. But then it returned the next day. And the next. Always parked in a different corner of the lot. Workers going in and out of random condos carrying toolboxes and clipboards. When I asked a neighbor if she knew what was happening, she shrugged. Some kind of maintenance, I guess. They didn't say anything to me. It wasn't until weeks later that I got a phone call from the management company. A flat, professional voice told me my unit had been scheduled for a mandatory inspection of the HVAC closet. No email, no letter, no explanation, just a call. When? I asked. Tomorrow, the voice said. The next day, 2 men arrived at my condo. They wore generic uniforms with no company logos. One carried a flashlight, the other a camera. They went straight to the patio where my utility closet was, asked me to unlock it, and stepped inside without much of a word. 5 minutes later, one of them emerged and said flatly, "You've got mold." Mold. The word dropped like a brick. How bad? I asked. Pretty bad. You'll need remediation. I blinked. Wait, what? I've never had mold issues. This closet is insulated, sealed. How could mold just appear? The man shrugged. Ask your HOA. They'll give you the details. But you've got 15 days to get it fixed. And just like that, they were gone. Later that evening, I received my official notice by email. It read like a penalty. Inspection of your HVAC closet revealed mold. This is the homeowner's responsibility. You are required to remediate within 15 days at your own expense. I scrolled through the email, looking for explanations. There were none. No guidance, no contact info for approved contractors, just a threat. If I didn't comply, the HOA would take action. That was the moment I knew something was wrong. I started asking questions. First, I called the HOA-approved estimator who had inspected my closet. To my surprise, he actually answered candidly. "Yeah, this happens all the time in these condos," he said. "See, you've got a baseboard heater inside your utility closet. That heater runs whenever your HVAC runs, whether it's heat or AC, so when you're cooling your home in summer, that heater is running at the same time. Warm air, cold surfaces, moisture, condensation. Perfect for mold." I was stunned. "Wait, you're saying my closet heater runs when my AC runs? That makes no sense." He sighed. "It's a design flaw. Or at least, a very questionable design choice. The only way to turn it off is at the breaker panel. Some original owners were told about it when these condos were built. But if you're not an original owner, chances are nobody told you." I felt my stomach twist. The next day, I confronted the HOA manager. "Is this true? That the baseboard heater runs whenever the HVAC does?" "Yes," she said flatly. "And nobody told us?" "Original owners were informed, but I'm not an original owner. There's nothing in my deed, nothing in the bylaws, nothing in any disclosure documents." She shrugged. "That's not the HOA's responsibility. It's the homeowner's job to understand their systems. Mold is the result of negligence." Negligence. The word burned. It didn't take long before I realized I wasn't the only one. Walking through the parking lot, I noticed more white trucks, more workers hauling equipment into closets. A neighbor whispered to me, "They found mold in mine too. And in 3 other units on my row." "How many total?" I asked. She shook her head. "They won't say. But look around. The trucks are here every day. It's a lot." The HOA, meanwhile, sent no community-wide notice. No warning, no acknowledgement. Just private calls, one by one, unit by unit, like they were trying to keep it quiet. And yet the evidence was everywhere. Buzzing dehumidifiers, contractor vans, dumpsters filled with moldy drywall. I started to feel paranoid. Why had they staggered the inspections? Why hadn't they warned everyone? Why pretend it was just my problem, when clearly half the community was affected? When I pressed the manager again for numbers, she stonewalled me. "We don't disclose that information." I asked for the board's reasoning behind mandatory inspections. She snapped. It was decided internally. I asked who would pay for damages caused by the faulty heater design. She cut me off. 15 days. That's your deadline. Click. Call over. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured the closet, dark, damp, filled with invisible spores. I pictured my kids breathing it in, my furniture absorbing the smell. And I pictured the HOA board sitting in some closed meeting, smiling tightly as they shifted all blame onto the homeowners. I opened the breaker panel, flipped off the switch to the heater, and listened to the silence. No hum, no heat. Just quiet. Why had nobody told us? Why had this secret been buried for decades? The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. This wasn't negligence. This wasn't bad luck. This was a system rigged to create mold, and now we were the ones paying the price. By morning, I knew I wasn't going to just let it go. Because if mold was in my unit, and in my neighbors, and in the dozens of units those trucks had visited, then this wasn't just my battle. It was the beginning of something bigger. The first real clue that I wasn't alone came from a conversation at the mailboxes. A woman from the building across the lot, someone I barely knew, leaned in and whispered, "Did they call you about the closet?" I blinked. "Yeah, mold." She nodded, eyes darting around like someone might be listening. "Same here. They said it was my negligence. But I've only been here a year, and I never even knew about that damn heater." Another neighbor, overhearing us, stepped closer. "Mine too. They made it sound like I was the only one. But I've seen the trucks, every building's got them." That's when it hit me. This wasn't just a few isolated cases. This was community-wide. The next few days, whispers turned into conversations. Conversations turned into clusters. By the dumpsters, a man muttered, "They told me 15 days or else." By the pool, a woman confessed, "They said it's normal." But why would a heater run with the AC? In the parking lot, another scoffed. I asked how many units are affected. The manager hung up on me. Piece by piece, the picture became clearer. This wasn't negligence. It was design, and the HOA was desperate to keep it quiet. I started keeping notes. Unit 203, mold. Unit 307, mold. Unit 114, mold. Within a week, I had a list of a dozen affected units. And those were just the ones who admitted it. The trucks kept coming daily. One neighbor joked bitterly, "At this point, the trucks should just park here permanently. It's their new office." Nobody laughed. Finally, I decided to confront the board directly. I attended the next HOA meeting, held in the cramped community room with folding chairs and stale coffee. Karen, the board president, sat stiffly at the front. The property manager, Dana, hovered nearby. When the floor opened for resident questions, I stood. Why weren't homeowners informed about the inspections in advance? Karen smiled tightly. Inspections are routine. There's nothing unusual. I held up my list. Routine? Then why have mold trucks been here every day for a month? Why are dozens of units affected? A ripple of murmurs spread through the room. Dana shifted uncomfortably. Karen's smile faltered. "We don't disclose private information about other units." "This isn't private," I shot back. This is community-wide, and you're telling everyone it's their fault. How is it negligence if the heaters were designed to run with the AC? The room went silent. Eyes widened. Karen cleared her throat. Original owners were informed. A man from the back shouted, "I'm not an original owner." "Nobody told me." Another added, "We bought last year." Nothing in the paperwork. The silence cracked. Voices rose. Accusations flew. The meeting devolved into chaos. "Why didn't you warn us? You're covering this up. You just want us to pay for your mistakes." Karen banged her gavel, shouting for order, but the crowd wasn't listening. For the first time, the board looked rattled. Afterward, in the parking lot, the atmosphere buzzed like a storm about to break. "That was the first time anyone called them out," someone told me. "They can't keep stonewalling. We should get a lawyer." The idea hung in the air like smoke. The next morning, I found flyers taped to mailboxes. "Mold is everywhere. Demand answers." No one signed them, but I didn't have to guess. People were waking up. Later that week, I received another call from the property manager. "This is a reminder that remediation must be completed within 15 days. Failure to comply will result in HOA action." I asked calmly, "What about reimbursement? What about the construction defect that caused this?" Her tone hardened. "That is not the HOA's responsibility." Click. She hung up. By now, the neighborhood was buzzing with anger. At night, you could see clusters of residents gathered in driveways, gesturing wildly, voices rising. Some argued about contractors. Others debated legal options. But the common thread was fury at the board. One man, red-faced, shouted loud enough for half the block to hear, "If they think I'm paying thousands for their screw-up, they can come drag me out themselves." Someone cheered. Someone else muttered, "Maybe we should." The tension was thick, almost physical. That weekend, I invited a few neighbors into my unit to compare notes. 10 people showed up. We spread papers across my kitchen table. Inspection notices, invoices, emails from management. One neighbor pointed at her paperwork. "Look, the language is identical. They're just copying and pasting. No details, no accountability." Another added, "They told me my kid's asthma was my fault for poor ventilation." "Are you kidding me?" Voices rose. Fists slammed the table. "This isn't negligence. This is systemic. They're gaslighting us. They think we'll just shut up and pay." I looked around at the furious faces and realized the HOA had lost control of the narrative. But anger alone doesn't solve mold. Bills were piling up. Contractors were demanding deposits. Some neighbors quietly scheduled remediation, swallowing the costs, afraid of fines. Others dug in their heels, refusing to budge. The divide grew, and the HOA stayed silent. One night, I woke to the sound of raised voices outside. 2 neighbors were shouting near the dumpsters, their silhouettes sharp in the yellow glow of the street lamp. "Why'd you sign the damn papers? You're just letting them win." What else was I supposed to do? Let them fine me into bankruptcy? They got closer, jabbing fingers into each other's chests. A third neighbor stepped between them before fists flew. But the message was clear. This was no longer just about mold. It was about trust, power, and survival. And things were only going to get uglier. Rumors spread faster than mold spores. By now, everyone knew the basics. Every HVAC closet had a baseboard heater that ran with the AC, condensation built up, and mold grew. But nobody knew who to blame. The HOA blamed homeowners. The homeowners blamed the HOA. And quietly, more and more people began to wonder. Maybe it wasn't either of us. Maybe this started with the builder. It began with a slip of the tongue. At the pool one afternoon, a neighbor mentioned she'd overheard a contractor muttering, "Same defect as the other site. Should have been fixed years ago." Another claimed his cousin worked in construction and had told him flat out, "No sane engineer designs it that way." Heater and AC in the same box? That's a lawsuit waiting to happen. These whispers turned into suspicion, suspicion into theory, theory into accusation. The board knows, people said. They've always known. That's why they're being so quiet. They're covering for the builder. I dug deeper. An older resident remembered attending the original sales meeting when the condos were new. They brushed off questions about the closets. Said it was efficient design. Efficient, my ass. It's a time bomb. Another neighbor swore she saw a familiar name on the contractor vans. Same company that built the place. They're back, doing remediation under a different label. The idea that the HOA was in bed with the builder took hold like wildfire. At the next HOA meeting, the accusations spilled out. A man stood and shouted, "You knew about this defect. You've been hiding it." Karen, the president, went pale. "That's false." Another woman yelled, "Then why won't you say how many units are affected? Why are you protecting them?" Dana, the property manager, tried to calm the crowd. "Please, we're doing everything we can." Her words drowned in boos. One resident banged a fist on the folding table so hard that Karen jumped. "We're not paying for their mistakes. We're not paying for your cover-up." The gavel clattered uselessly against the noise. I'd never seen neighbors like this. People who once traded recipes at the pool were now red-faced, spitting accusations. Friends turned on friends. Voices cracked with rage. Finally, Karen screamed into the mic, "If you don't like it, file a lawsuit." Silence fell. Then a roar of voices rose louder than ever. After the meeting, the parking lot became a battlefield. Groups formed instantly. Those demanding legal action. Those terrified of the costs. Those furious at the HOA. Those muttering that, "Lawyers will eat us alive." One man yelled across the lot, "You're cowards if you don't sue." Another screamed back, "You'll bankrupt us all." They rushed toward each other, fists raised, before neighbors pulled them apart. Kids cried. Dogs barked. The whole scene looked like a riot waiting to happen. The next morning, flyers appeared on every door. Class action? Meet at Unit 112, Saturday night. No names, no signatures. Just an invitation. Saturday night, Unit 112 overflowed. Chairs scraped, voices filled the air, papers scattered across the coffee table. Someone had printed screenshots of emails, contracts, snippets of bylaws. This is systemic. They knew. We need to hit them in court. A retired lawyer among us warned, class actions are expensive. Long. You'll bleed money before you win anything. But anger drowned out caution. They think we'll just roll over. Not this time. They can't find all of us. If they want war, we'll give them war. Meanwhile, others grew nervous. A single mother whispered, "I can't afford to fight. If they find me, I'll lose my place." A retiree sighed, "We're all already drowning in bills. What happens if we lose?" The room split in two, fighters and fearful. And in that split, trust collapsed entirely. By the following week, whispers turned into open defiance. Contractor vans were met with hostility. Neighbors confronted workers, snapping photos, demanding answers. "Who hired you? Who's paying you? What are you covering up?" One worker muttered, "Lady, I'm just here to scrub mold." But his nervous glance said more than his words. The HOA responded with an email blast. All homeowners are reminded that harassment of contractors will not be tolerated. Remediation remains the homeowner's responsibility. Non-compliance will result in fines. Instead of calming people, it ignited them. Fines? For their screw-up? They think threats will silence us? Let them try. One evening, I walked past the dumpsters and found two men arguing again, this time, louder, harsher. "You're siding with the HOA. You're insane. I just don't want to lose my condo." The first shoved the second hard against the dumpster. The clang echoed across the lot. Neighbors ran to pull them apart. Someone shouted, "Call the cops." Blue lights flashed 10 minutes later. Officers took statements, shaking their heads at the absurdity of it all. "Over mold," one muttered. But we knew it wasn't about mold anymore. It was about power. That night, as I lay awake, I realized the mold wasn't the only thing growing here. Mistrust was spreading faster than spores. And if something didn't change soon, the entire community would rot from the inside out. The flyer for the secret meeting at Unit 112 had been crude, just black text on white paper, taped to doors late at night. But when Saturday arrived, more than 20 neighbors squeezed into the small condo. Chairs borrowed from patios, people leaning against walls, kids sent to bedrooms with iPads to keep them distracted. The air was thick with anger. They think they can fine us into silence. They knew about this defect for years. They're covering for the builder. A man named Robert slammed his fist on the table. Then we stop playing defense. We go on offense. Class action. Force them to answer. A retired paralegal named Ellen tried to caution the group. Class actions take years. Lawyers get rich. You may not see a dime. But Robert wasn't listening. Neither were most others. They can't keep calling this negligence. If every closet has the same heater design, then it's systemic. That's not on us, it's on them. Murmurs of agreement rippled around the room. I sat in the corner, listening. The energy was intoxicating. Neighbors who had never spoken were now allies, united by mold and fury. Yet I also saw fear in their eyes. A young mother whispered to me, "I can't afford legal fees. But if we don't fight, they'll bury us." That was the trap. Fight and risk losing everything. Or stay quiet and bleed slowly. The next official HOA meeting was scheduled for Tuesday. By then, the whispers had reached a fever pitch. The clubhouse was packed beyond capacity, standing room only, neighbors spilling into the hallway. Karen, the board president, banged the gavel. "Order, please. We'll begin." But order never came. From the moment the floor opened, voices exploded. "You lied to us. You hid the defect. You're protecting the builder." Karen tried to deny it. "That's false. The board has acted in good faith." Robert shouted back. "Then why won't you disclose how many units have mold? Why stagger inspections? Why threaten fines instead of helping us?" The room roared with approval. Dana, the property manager, tried to read from a prepared statement. But booze drowned her out. A man yelled, "Save your script, we're done with your cover-ups." A woman stood, waving photos of her gutted closet. "You call this negligence? You call this my fault? My kids are breathing this." The crowd cheered, fists in the air. Karen's face hardened. "This is disruptive. If you don't calm down, we will adjourn." "Adjourn?" someone screamed. "We waited weeks for answers." "You'll answer in court," shouted Robert. At that, the room erupted. People surged forward, shouting over one another. Chairs scraped, papers flew, someone's coffee spilled across the floor. Karen's gavel pounded, useless against the chaos. Then came the shove. Two men, one pro-lawsuit and one terrified of legal costs, started screaming inches from each other's faces. "You're bankrupting us. You're letting them win. One shoved the other hard. The man stumbled backward into a row of folding chairs, toppling two neighbors. Screams filled the room. "Call the cops," someone yelled. The police arrived within minutes, two officers in dark uniforms, hands on their belts, eyes scanning the frenzy. "What's going on here?" one demanded. Everyone started shouting at once. "They lied. There's mold. They hit me. They're stealing from us." The officers raised their voices. "Enough." One at a time. Karen, pale and trembling, tried to regain control. "This meeting is adjourned," she shouted, gavel slamming. The officers nodded grimly. "Everyone out. Now." In the parking lot afterward, the scene was surreal. Neighbors huddled in clusters, voices hushed but venomous. Some cried. Others swore revenge. The flashing police lights cast everything in blue and red, like a crime scene. One officer pulled me aside quietly. "Look, I don't know your situation. But I've been to a lot of HOA meetings in this town. None this bad. You folks need to figure this out before someone really gets hurt." That night, my inbox exploded with messages. "HOA is finished. Lawsuit now. Don't give in." And one chilling note slipped under my door. "If you side with them, you'll regret it." No signature. Just rage in ink. By morning, the neighborhood looked the same: manicured lawns, neat driveways, quiet streets. But beneath the surface, something fundamental had shifted. The mold was real. The defect was real. The cover-up was likely. But the bigger danger now wasn't in the closets. It was in us. Neighbors who once shared barbecues now glared across the lot. Parents who once swapped babysitting duties now whispered about betrayal. The community wasn't just cracking. It was shattering. And in the middle of it all, the board prepared its next move. An email landed that afternoon. Special session to address HVAC remediation policy, mandatory attendance encouraged. Mandatory. Encouraged. The contradiction summed it up perfectly. This wasn't about mold anymore. It was war. The morning after the police broke up the HOA meeting, the neighborhood was eerily quiet. No kids playing in the courtyards. No neighbors chatting at the mailboxes. Just silence, punctuated by the occasional contractor van pulling up to another unit. But beneath that silence, everyone was buzzing. By noon, messages were flying through group texts and Facebook threads. "They can't shut us down. Next time, we bring a lawyer to the meeting. Class action is the only way." For the first time, the phrase, collective lawsuit, wasn't just whispered in driveways. It was openly discussed, typed in bold caps, passed along like a rallying cry. That evening, a group gathered again in Unit 112. Bigger this time. Nearly 30 people crammed shoulder to shoulder, the air hot with body heat and rage. Robert, who had become the unofficial leader of the rebellion, stood at the front. He held a thick folder in his hands. "I've spoken with 2 law firms already," he announced. "They believe we have a case. Systemic design defect. Concealment. Negligence. They're ready to move forward." The room buzzed. Some cheered. Others bit their lips nervously. Ellen, the retired paralegal, raised a hand. "And the cost?" Robert nodded. "They'll take it on contingency. No upfront fees. But we'll need signatures. Lots of them. The more, the stronger our case." Murmurs rippled through the room. I watched neighbors glance at one another, their expressions a mix of excitement and fear. A man muttered, "If we sue, HOA dues will skyrocket. They'll bury us in legal fees." A woman shot back, "They're burying us already. Look at my closet, it's gutted. $4,000 out of pocket, gone." Tension flared again, but Robert cut it off. "We either fight now or pay forever. Your choice." The next day, the HOA fired back. An email arrived in every inbox, dripping with passive-aggressive menace. The board is aware of disruptive behavior and false accusations circulating within the community. Homeowners are reminded that harassment of board members, contractors, or management staff will result in fines and legal action. The board is maintaining a list of repeat offenders. Continued disruption may affect your standing with the association. The blacklist. Nobody said the word out loud, but that's what it was. A veiled threat, a reminder. Step out of line, and you'll pay. The email hit like a bomb. Screenshots flew across group chats. They're blacklisting us. One neighbor posted on Facebook. This is intimidation, plain and simple. Another replied, good, let them find me, I'll see them in court. But fear worked too. A couple of residents who had been vocal suddenly went quiet. One even pulled out of the Saturday meetings, muttering that he couldn't risk it. The divide widened. Fighters on one side, the fearful on the other. That week, things turned personal. Karen, the board president, walked through the parking lot and was confronted by a group of furious neighbors. Voices rose, accusations flew. You're covering up for the builder. You lied to us. You'll pay for this. Karen snapped back, her face red with fury. You people are out of control. This community will fall apart because of you. Someone shouted. It already has. The confrontation nearly spiraled into violence before Karen stormed off, flanked by Dana, the property manager, who looked pale and shaken. The pressure cooker boiled over again at the special session the board had called. The clubhouse was packed, security guards posted at the doors this time. Karen stood at the front, her voice shaking but defiant. We are here to address remediation policies. Homeowners must understand that mold is a result of negligence. The crowd erupted. Negligence? You designed it this way. You're lying again. Where's the builder? Someone threw a stack of papers onto the floor. They scattered like confetti, covered in photos of mold-infested closets. Security rushed forward, trying to restore order. But it was too late. The session collapsed in minutes, the board retreating behind closed doors while residents shouted through the walls. Later that night, Robert called another meeting in Unit 112. His voice was hoarse from shouting but firm. They've declared war on us, he said. Now we finish this. He placed a document on the table. A retainer agreement from one of the law firms. All we need are signatures. One by one, neighbors stepped forward. Pens scratched against paper. Names lined the page. Not everyone signed. Some lingered in the back, arms crossed, eyes darting nervously. But enough did. Enough to make it real. The next morning, the HOA struck again. A notice taped to doors read, failure to remediate within 15 days will result in fines, liens, and possible foreclosure proceedings. The threat was no longer veiled. It was blunt, brutal. Gasps echoed through the parking lot as people read the notices. One woman burst into tears on the spot. Another cursed loud enough for the whole block to hear. This is extortion, someone shouted. But the board didn't care. They had doubled down. And yet, for all their threats, the tide was turning. The signatures were piling up. The lawyer had been contacted. The case was moving forward. The HOA could fine us. They could blacklist us. They could threaten foreclosure. But they couldn't silence all of us. That night, I found another anonymous note slipped under my door. Stay strong. They can't stop us all. I held it in my hands for a long time, heart pounding. Because for the first time, I believed it. The lawsuit papers were filed on a gray Monday morning. Robert walked through the parking lot with the confidence of a general leading troops into battle, holding a thick envelope in one hand and his phone in the other. "It's official," he told anyone within earshot. "They can't bully us anymore. We're taking them to court." Cheers erupted from a cluster of neighbors. But on the other side of the lot, I saw others shaking their heads, whispering. Some were terrified. Some were furious that Robert had dragged them all into a legal war they hadn't agreed to. The community was split clean down the middle. 2 weeks later, the HOA responded. A letter arrived, stamped with the association's seal, and copies were taped to doors for everyone to see. The board rejects the false accusations contained in the complaint. The association has acted in good faith and within its authority. Legal costs incurred in defense will be billed to the association as a whole. Translation: We were paying for both sides of the fight. The revelation landed like a bomb. "You mean my dues are funding their lawyers?" someone shouted at the mailboxes. "They're making us pay to fight ourselves," another screamed. Tension boiled over that night when a group of angry residents confronted Karen in the parking lot. "You're stealing from us. You're using our money against us. Resign or we'll drag you out." Karen, cornered, snapped. "Go ahead and try." She shoved one of the men who had stepped too close. He shoved back. Within seconds, fists flew. Shouts echoed across the complex. Someone's phone clattered to the ground, recording everything as neighbors pulled them apart. The fight ended with police lights flashing once again. Meanwhile, the mold problem didn't wait for lawsuits. Contractors kept gutting closets, hauling out drywall, running industrial fans. Bills stacked higher and higher. Those who had refused remediation now faced escalating fines. Some whispered that liens had already been placed on certain units. "This isn't about mold anymore," Ellen muttered one evening. "This is about survival." The first court hearing arrived months later, in a beige courthouse downtown. A dozen neighbors crammed onto one side of the gallery, whispering anxiously, while the board sat stiffly on the other side, flanked by expensive-looking attorneys. The judge listened as both sides argued. Words like negligence, concealment, systemic defect filled the air. The HOA's lawyers insisted it was all homeowner responsibility. Our side argued it was baked into the design, hidden from buyers. The judge didn't rule that day. Instead, she ordered discovery. Documents, engineering reports, emails, all the things the board had tried to keep buried. For the first time, we had a chance at truth. But truth has a price. As weeks passed, assessments began arriving. Special fees billed to every homeowner to fund the board's legal defense. Even those siding with Robert now winced when the invoices landed in their mailboxes. "This is killing us," one man said bitterly. "We're paying thousands for mold and thousands for lawyers. Either way, we lose." Neighbors who had once stood shoulder to shoulder now turned on each other again. Some accused Robert of dragging them into financial ruin. Others accused the fearful of being traitors. The cracks widened. Then came the worst night yet. Another HOA meeting, this one packed with tension so thick it felt combustible. Karen stood at the front, flanked by lawyers, her voice brittle with anger. "The association is united in its defense. Anyone spreading lies or disrupting meetings will face immediate fines." Robert stood from his chair, waving a stack of signatures. "You're finished, Karen. We have the numbers. You'll answer in court." Shouts rose from both sides of the room. People leapt to their feet, pointing, screaming, veins bulging. And then someone hurled a chair. It crashed against the wall inches from the board table, splintering wood. Chaos exploded. People surged forward, fists swinging. Papers flew through the air like confetti. Police were called again, this time with backup. Officers stormed in, separating bodies, shouting commands. One resident was hauled out in handcuffs, his face bloodied. The community had officially crossed the line from disagreement to riot. Weeks later, the fallout lingered. The lawsuit trudged on. Mold still spread. Bills still climbed. Friendships had shattered beyond repair. Walking through the complex felt like moving through a war zone. Not of rubble and smoke, but of distrust and cold glares. Neighbors turned away when you waved. Parents kept their kids from playing together. The HOA newsletter, once full of pool schedules and garden club updates, now read like a list of threats. And yet, in the middle of it all, there was still a strange sense of hope. Because the lawsuit was alive. Discovery was underway. Engineers were drafting reports. Emails were being pulled. The truth, however ugly, was coming. One night, I found Robert standing outside, staring at the row of contractor vans lined up like soldiers. "Think we'll win?" I asked. He didn't look away. "Doesn't matter. They can't hide forever. We've already won more than they ever wanted to give. The community might never be the same. Some people would sell and flee. Others would keep fighting until their last dime was gone. But one thing was certain. The mold wasn't the only thing rotting here. And maybe, just maybe, shining a light on it would finally force something to change."
Thanks for watching this story. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more unbelievable HOA stories. Have you ever dealt with something this absurd in your own neighborhood? Share your experience in the comments below. I'd love to read your stories. And as always, stay tuned for the next episode.